anyway.
The world is fucked, but he probably got rid of that title, didn't he?
World
he had
is
to
fucked.
rework
I like
it.
that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That can be the title of your book, The World is Fucked. There we go. Why don't we kick off with that then? The World is Fucked. Okay, so Susie Violet Ward. Here to talk about how the world is fucked.
Yes, it is.
Well, pleasure. I can't believe I only met you a week ago, and here we are, and we're enmeshed in each other's lives.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Which is quite funny, really, between meeting up. It's going to be nice to see you in person as well. I'm looking forward to that. So, for context,
I don't think it was even a week ago.
It wasn't, was it? When was it?
It was Saturday.
It was Saturday. Oh my God, what day is it today? Wednesday. You're right. It's like 5 days, 4.5 days.
And what have I done in that time? Like, think about what I've actually done in that time. It's crazy. You've got me into being a Miami conference volunteer. I've been accepted. I've booked my flight. I've got my accommodation. I'm planning it at my end. That's all happened in such a short space of time.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, actually. It's going to be. Have you been to Miami before?
Once when I was 11, so I don't know if that counts.
Oh, okay, random. When you were 11, what were you taking to Miami when you were 11 for?
Well, my friend had an uncle out there who was getting married, and she was allowed to bring a friend, and I was the friend. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's nice. It's quite sweltering at that time of year. So.
Is it?
Yeah, I've been trying to think about what I can wear that's. I just live in leggings now, so I'm kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to wear that I can...
I freaked out when they asked me the size of T-shirt. I was like, I don't wear T-shirts. I don't want to wear a T-shirt. I wear dresses. I don't wear T-shirts. And I was thinking of writing to them and going, would it be okay if I didn't wear the T-shirt? But I didn't think that would go down too well.
You'd be like, I can have one made with your logo printed all over it. Would that work?
Yes, I would rather have a dress made, especially for the conference, than wear a T-shirt.
Actually, that would be quite cool. A Bitcoin logo covered dress might actually be quite a good idea. You should get one done. Okay, cool. Well, so I guess for everybody else's benefit who maybe doesn't know who you are, or maybe don't know who you are, I should say, could you give an intro about yourself and who you are, your background?
Okay, so my background, I started off as an accountant and became a financial analyst.
I can tell.
Can you? Is it obvious? I'm such a stereotype, aren't I? I just fit in a box. It's brilliant.
You just look. Everything about you screams accountant.
I've got a very funny TikTok video I made about that I'll have to send you later.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
So we just realised that world didn't suit me, obviously. But I was a Cognos developer, and that is a planning system. I used to develop and support that system, and that died because it was shit. And I had an opportunity to retrain as an Oracle developer and support person, and I thought, if I do that, I'm going to be stuck here forever, working in the city for an insurance company, clock watching, and trying to learn about the things that interest me in my spare time while still trying to look after 2 children. So I had an opportunity to take redundancy rather than retrain. So I took it. And since then, I've just been trying to find where I can be useful in the Bitcoin space. So I've been writing articles and researching and trying to raise awareness about central bank digital currencies. I haven't found just one thing. I've been doing lots of little things, but it's so much more, even though I haven't been paid since March, it's so much more rewarding than anything that I was doing before. And I'd rather live on a shoestring and do something that's meaningful than go back up to the city, get paid a decent wage and just live for that 2-week holiday.
Yeah, that's very true. Can you talk then about your Bitcoin journey? Because if you've come through like accountancy, programming, did you come to Bitcoin from a more technical perspective, from a programmer's mindset, or was that more of a ideological mindset, I guess?
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted to buy Bitcoin so I could purchase some. I can't say it. I'm so sorry. So I could purchase some Doge.
Right, that's it. Interview over.
I don't have it now.
Yeah.
I didn't even keep it as a souvenir. Oh my God, I'm going red. I feel so embarrassed. I didn't even keep it as a souvenir. It's gone. But that's why. So I was on an Exodus app, and I wanted to get some Doge. I can't even say it. I wanted to get some Doge.
Well, I guess to take a step back, then, like, oh, you fucked it now. To take a step back, then, why Doge?
I just read an article on it. I read an article. I don't even know what the article said, but it was one of those. You know, by the time everybody's singing a shitcoin's praise, you know that it's all over and really you shouldn't be buying it. So that was the time that I decided to buy it. I didn't know any of this stuff at the time, so I thought, well, how do you buy it? And then I was interested in the concept. So were you
thinking about it as an investment? Was that the kind of reasoning at the time? You thought, I'll just buy some because it'll be an investment and it may go up in price?
Yes and no. It was more, what is this and why is it different to everything else? So it was purely a little bit of an investment. If I made a little bit of money on it, that would have been great. But with the 70 quid that I bought, that obviously wasn't my intention.
Never know.
I wasn't naive enough back then to think it would 1,000x in 2 weeks.
And so you had to buy Bitcoin to convert it into Doge, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was your first foray into buying Bitcoin. So you bought 70 quid's worth of Bitcoin, immediately converted it into Doge.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then I told my husband. I was like, hey, guess what I did today? It was like,
are you still married?
Well, do you know what though? He's absolutely instrumental to everything that I'm doing now, because I can bounce things off him. He is just as into it as I am. He's the one that recommends podcasts. If I've got a problem that I'm trying to solve, I can talk it through with him because he understands everything that I'm going on about, which is unusual because most people don't. So, yeah, he was then interested, and it was just sparked an interest in him, and so the rest is history.
Did you guys already both have an interest in crypto more generally then at that point before you bought your Doge, or that kind of kicked off the journey? Okay, it was
like, what is this, and what does it do? Why does it exist? That was what we were trying to look into.
Right, interesting. So how long ago was that?
It's hard to tell. I think it might have been about 18 months to 2 years ago, roughly.
Right. And then why did that kick off your Bitcoin research journey? Like, what was the next step for you?
So then obviously I was a shitcoiner for quite a long time, probably a good 6 months. And I'm sorry, you did ask the question. But I think a lot of people start like that, don't they? So I did a lot of shitcoinery and eventually started understanding how centralised they all were and how unprotected people were, and how it was just a case of taking all the bad things that exist in the current system and just putting it on a blockchain. There was no benefit. Some of them are technologies that do solve some problems. I can see the benefit of some of it. So for example, I quite like the idea of being able to buy albums and music, and so you've got ownership on a blockchain. I can see how smart contracts are going to come into their own in the future when it comes to even disrupting publishing and paying royalties, all that. I can see the innovation, but 99.9% of everything on the market is just a scam. And it takes such a long time to work out what's good and what's not. And I'd say there's only a handful that are vaguely interesting, but even they are highly centralized. So I just became very wary.
And what was your kind of interest in the decentralization piece then? Like, why did you care?
So I've always been a rebel. Even at school, the teachers hated me. They did. I went to school with my husband as well. He can vouch for this. I was always asking questions. I was always pissing them off. Just things. I was brought up to be an equal in my household with my parents, and so when I went to school and I was treated like a moron, I found it really hard to deal with. So do you know who you're talking to? I don't think you do. So I remember going into class.
Don't you know
once.
who I am?
Yeah. I am your equal. I just know a little bit less than you, but that is the only difference. So I remember going into a class, I think it was a science class or something, and Mr. Eakins called me Susanna, which is my name on my birth certificate. I put my hand up.
Is that with an S or a Z or a Z, should we say? For
Susanna, and my name Susie is spelled Susie, which is very important because if it's spelled with a Z, it doesn't look like my name to me. So thank you for bringing that up. So I put my hands up and I said, Mr. Eakins, my preferred name is Susie. Would you mind making a note of that in your register so you can remember for next time? I must have been about 12, and he just he's just like.
He thinks this one's going to be a problem.
I know what you're like. Yeah. And it was just whenever there was an injustice, which there often was at school, I'd get so mad. Like, say if I got a minus mark for something that I didn't do, I'd end up fighting the teacher over it and end up with 2. I couldn't let anything always. I couldn't let anything go that felt wrong. And I think it was really misunderstood because I was expected to be a cog in a system. I was expected to toe the line, keep my head down and do what I was told. And I couldn't.
Yeah, it didn't. Do you know, it's funny. I can relate to that, actually. I was very similar pain in the ass to what you were. In fact, the only reason my teacher told my mum I wasn't kicked out of school was because I did all my homework. I really liked doing the homework and I really liked the learning piece of it. But I found the whole machinery just absolutely ridiculous. Of course, and I found as well school was just too easy, to be honest with you. There just wasn't enough work to do. So the net result of that is you end up being bored. You don't like the way the system is constructed, and so you end up being sort of disruptive. But yes, I can definitely relate.
Oh, see, I was the opposite. I had undiagnosed ADHD and dyslexia, and I thought I was thick until I was about 30. So when you're growing up in the 80s and you've got these two, you don't feel normal, you don't feel like you fit. But that didn't mean that I wasn't bright and I couldn't work stuff out. I was brilliant at problem solving, but you don't learn that at school. I was excellent at critical thinking, but you don't learn that at school. And all the skills that I was really good at and that I was encouraged to do outside of school, I didn't get a chance to shine. It was just a case of regurgitating information. And for me, that made no sense.
Yeah. So you were an early Bitcoiner.
I was. And do you know what? It was my husband that came up with the name Decentralisation a couple of years ago. And he just sat there and he was just like, the penny dropped. Knowing me from my school life and knowing the journey that I've taken in my life, he just went, do you know what? You should set up a Twitter account called Decentralisation. Like, you've always been Decentralisation, haven't you? And I'm like, yeah, I have.
Yeah. So let's get on to Decentralisation's journey then. So you've gone through the Bitcoin learning journey. What was your orange pill moment then, or do you have a specific moment, or was it like a gradual? How did that all play out? You've got the Doge sat there burning a hole in your wallet. You start reading about this stuff and thinking, gosh, it's a bit centralized. Was there anyone specifically that was very influential for you? What was the kind of aha moment, I guess?
I think it just grew. I don't think there was any moment. It was just an incremental understanding that cemented that belief in why it was good and how many problems it could solve. Like, Bitcoin fixes this, Yeah. And then when the people say that, you're like, yeah, it does, yeah. And every time there's a social issue and you think it through and you think, yeah, Bitcoin does fix that. Oh my God.
When you break it down to first principles, it's actually hilarious. Almost hilarious, is that the right word? But it's kind of like when you can almost take any topic, and when you start pulling it apart, eventually you just get down to that base layer of like unsound money. Have you read Seifert's book, The Fiat Standard?
No, but I am halfway through the Bitcoin Standard.
Yeah, I actually think people should start with the fiat standard. Like, having read them both now, yeah, I actually think when I recommend it to people now, I say start with the fiat standard and then read the Bitcoin standard, because the fiat standard kind of lays out the problem quite well, but it goes through so many different areas of life, even down to like the food chain. And he talks about fiat food and, you know, all this kind of stuff, and how the food chain got corrupted essentially through unsound money. So I find that book is really good because it kind of details everything and really explains it. And for a normie that hasn't necessarily gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you really then understand why having an unsound money as a base layer is problematic, and how having Bitcoin as a sound base layer fixes it. So I definitely recommend that.
And also, as soon as you use the B word, people switch off.
Yeah, or the oh my God, it's a scam pops to the forefront. Yeah, because they've been so conditioned with crypto scams that they think that Bitcoin is the same thing. It's not.
They're just reading. No, it's not. And all they've been, because I had this with a family member at a party that I went to. I was talking about it, and he just came out and said it's a Ponzi, and I'm like, really? It's like, have you just read a headline in the Telegraph, and now all of a sudden you're basing your entire, and it really annoyed me. And when I told him that I thought it was brilliant because you could send it to anyone with a mobile phone, you know, in pennies, 4 seconds, and it was a peer-to-peer cash, that was the end of the conversation. He didn't even ask me a single question, and I thought that was really odd.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say in that situation, don't waste your time, because I think if somebody has... Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily about giving up, but I think if somebody doesn't have an innate curiosity to understand a technology that's so revolutionary, it's a bit like, you know, you imagine trying to explain the internet to somebody 30 years ago, let's say, and you would get that same shuttered look. And I just sort of think, do you know what? It's fine. Like, just if somebody's not genuinely curious and doesn't have a curious personality and isn't interested in learning, they'll be a Bitcoiner eventually, because they'll have to be. But, you know, they'll just miss the early boat and the fun that we're all having in reinventing the world. And, you know, and I guess how much hope and joy it's giving all of us. So, I mean, you know, I'm just like, yeah, you want to miss that experience, then, you know, whatever. But I think you will end up depressing yourself if you try and convince people otherwise.
But this person, I would...
You shall remain nameless.
Yeah, I hope they don't listen to this. I would class as exceptionally bright, very intelligent, and under normal circumstances, a curious person who is interested in what I'm doing generally. But on this particular topic, the shutters just came down from my point of view, for no reason.
I mean, there's maybe some bias that's in there for whatever reason then. I guess. Can you talk to me a little bit about your journey into your foray into writing then? Because you've written this book, The Little Cockroach. And I think you were talking as well about the fact that you've sort of traveled around schools and libraries and things like that reading this book. I'd love to kind of understand a bit more how that happened. Like, did you have any background in writing, and what the heck made you think you could write a book? How dare you?
I know. Well, I just had these ideas in my head, and they were bubbling up in my head, and I was just thinking about them, and I was reading books with my children, and there were some books that I would love it when they picked them up. I think, oh yeah, this one again, like the Gruffalo. Like, I loved reading that with the kids. And there were other ones I won't name because it's not fair, that my heart would sink when they picked it up. And so it got me thinking, why do I enjoy that one and why don't I enjoy that one? So I started trying to think of my own stories in my head, to try to think as a parent, what would I like to read? And I came up with these two little bugs at first, and then I turned them into cockroaches, because cockroaches are amazing. I know people hate them. They really hate them. But actually, they are 55 million years older than the dinosaur. They are the planet's recyclers and essential to nutrient recycling on our planet. They're very, very resilient. When they bred in space, they mutated and got stronger. So super resilient.
So, whoa, back up here. When they bred in space. What?
So they sent up a little, I think it was the Russians, I'm sure it was the Russians, sent up a little cockroach called Hope. I'm sure it was Hope. And she had 33 little space babies. And and a lot of Earth beings that they've sent up. This is going to look like I really like aliens, doesn't it?
It does, because you've got this alien head in the background now as well. So I'm just everyone has you've been written off as a weirdo.
This has happened to me before. Whereas I think I bought this. This is one of my first purchases when I moved out of home. I didn't have any money, so he's really special to me. His name's Alberto. It was one of the first expensive purchases that I ever made in my life. So because I had him, everyone thought I liked aliens. So then my dad bought me an alien foot mat for my house, and then my colleagues bought me an alien light or a flying saucer light. And then the more stuff that you get that's aliens, and then people start to think that you really love aliens, and you start getting more stuff, and it's not true. It's just Alberto. I only love him. Yeah, but talking about space babies. Sorry.
Yeah, space babies with the cockroaches. Wait, so hang on a second. So why did you research this? Sorry, this is very strange. How did you even know that cockroaches went to space? I had no idea.
So once I decided that I was going to use cockroaches as a character, I knew that they were resilient. I set up a Twitter account and started to pretend to be a cockroach. So I would respond to people's messages as Pedro. As Pedro the little cockroach. So, for example, if people, I'd do searches like cockroach aeroplane, and then I'd find people freaking out about finding cockroaches on aeroplanes. Then I'd reply to them and go, "Hey, I'm sorry." There was no accent, obviously, it was Twitter, but in my head there was an accent. "I'm sorry, that must have been my cousin Jose. I'll tell him to keep out your way next time." Just random shit like that, just really stupid. Anyway, so then after I'd built up this character, I used it as an opportunity to research them. And the more I learnt about them, the more I realised how brilliant they were. Because out of about 4,500 species of cockroach, only about 30 are a pest to humans. But some of them are beautiful. There's some, you've got bright metallic ones and blue ones.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. I mean, to find a pest to humans, I guess. I mean, people are terrified when they see them. And I think the perception is when you find one in your home, it means you must be dirty.
I wouldn't be happy, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it is very climate specific. I mean, you know, you don't really get cockroaches so much in the UK, I don't feel. And hotter climates, they're everywhere and you can't really get rid of them. So it's kind of a thing, isn't it? So the cockroaches went into space and they bred. Why do you have any context as to why that? I don't know why we're going off on this tangent, by the way, but it's just interesting. Now I'm kind of like, why did they breed cockroaches in space, and what was?
I think they tried
doing?
lots of different ones. They tried lots of different animals, and a lot of them died. Not animals. Like I don't think they sent like dogs. Yeah,
beings, right. So the idea was to see if they would mate in space.
And then have babies, and what would happen to those babies, yeah. So
Hope had 30 babies, and who was Hope's partner? Do we know?
Don't have it.
Don't know. Wasn't Pedro?
No. I don't want to think of him in that way. He's my baby.
Okay, so you developed this Pedro character, and then you wrote a kid's book. Which is very cool.
So I was thinking of the story, and then one night I was lying in bed, and you know you get that half in, half out of sleep thing, but then ideas pop into your head, and you know that if you don't write them down, you'll lose them. So I sat up and I just typed in the first 2 or 3 verses that were in my head, and once I'd started it, I had to keep adding to it, and then is it
like rhyming when you say verses? Is it kind of like a poetry type book?
Yes.
Got it. Oh, very cool. And so how did you end up reading this in schools then? Did you just offer yourself up to the education system and say, hey, I'm going to come round and read this book for you?
There's 2. Because every book will be a different country. So the idea is that it's meant to teach children about culture and travel, but without them knowing that they're learning. So and also with an environmental twist, because these cockroaches, gives me an opportunity to teach them to not fear what they don't understand. That's the general ethos. So these little guys start off being really bored, and then they decide to go on an adventure. And then at the end of the book, they're really super happy because they got off their asses and actually made something happen. So the opening dedication is try and you might, don't and you certainly won't. And that's the kind of ethos that I like to have running through it, that you reap what you sow. So that it's a multifaceted book that teaches about culture, about getting out your comfort zone, tenacity, and the resilience of these wonderful creatures. So I'm on a website called Find an Author, and then people would just contact me and say, do you want to come and do an assembly or a workshop or something?
Oh, that's so cool. Wow. I've been incubating, actually, funnily enough, a book about like Bitcoin with my dog. So I used to have this, I've shut it down now because I couldn't manage all the different things going on, but I had this Crypto Dog Says handle, because back at the start of my journey I was like, oh, it's all the same, it's all crypto. But I used to do the same thing, funnily enough, on Twitter. I would respond to people in the way that the dog would, and the idea was that the dog was explaining Bitcoin to humans. So I started writing a Substack, and then I've been incubating. I'll have to, when we meet each other, I'll bring you my rough draft, and you can
oh, that would be great.
Critique it. Yes, that would be really
that.
fun. You can critique it for me and see if you think I'm going in the right direction, because I kind of have been doing it just on the side and writing it and thinking, oh, that'd be really cool. But it'd be nice to have somebody who's actually gone through the journey, pick it apart.
Yeah, and it's needed.
Yeah, well, I just think it's really cute. I mean, like you said, I think children's books are just so much fun, and in some ways they're more fun, I feel, to write than adults' books. You know,
they're harder as well. People think that they're not, that they're easy, and they're not, because it has to make sense. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, which I know sounds really straightforward. But so in one of the verses, I wrote something like, they landed in a strange land of spaghetti and buildings and spaghetti. Something. They were feeling rather sweaty, or something like that. And then the editor. And the editor looked at it and said, hang on a sec, they've come from Mexico to Italy. They wouldn't be sweaty. They're cockroaches that are used to a Mexican climate coming to Italy. That doesn't make sense, and kids will rip you to pieces. So that's the kind of detail that you have to go to.
It's funny as well, because it's funny you say that. Kids would rip you to pieces because they would pick up the inconsistency.
Yeah,
and they wouldn't just go where you're telling them to go. They'd be like, but that doesn't make sense. How does that happen? They might also pick you up on the fact, do cockroaches sweat?
Yeah, absolutely. All of that stuff has to be thought about, and the story has to make sense. And it's not that easy to have something that flows, rhymes, makes sense, has a purpose. They get into the right amount of peril, get out of scrapes quickly. You know, it really does take a lot of thought. But people think that writing it is easy, and sometimes it can drive you insane when you're trying to solve a word problem that you can't quite get right because the rhythm isn't there.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you wrote it in poetry. So did this kind of, you've obviously had your journey into Bitcoin via Doge. You've done the book writing. Is that how you ended up kind of combining the things and starting to write thought pieces in the Bitcoin space? Was it that kind of writing experience that fed into that?
I think so. So like with the writing the book, sometimes when I've got lots of thoughts going on to it, because my brain whizzes at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and the only way that I can get rid of that madness up there is to write it down. It's the only way that it can leave me and I can find peace. So when I was researching everything into Bitcoin, the philosophy, the technology, you know, what it fixes, etc., I had all these thoughts just constantly going around in my brain, and the only way I could get rid of it was to write it, and it just came out. And so that's why I started writing.
That's so interesting. I know this anecdote, and I can't remember who it was, but it was a famous poet, and she had described the process of writing a poem, and she said it's like it comes to me, and she'd be out in the field near her house. I think she lived somewhere rural. And she said it was almost like it would come over the hill, and she would have to race home to kind of front run it, to get a pen to write it down and almost kind of catch it in motion. So it's really interesting that you have that experience. I love what you just said, where you were like, I have to kind of write it down to get it out of me. That's really interesting. And so that's kind of led to you writing all of these thought pieces and going down the rabbit hole of these various topics in Bitcoin. Wow. That's totally fascinating. So when did you write your first Bitcoin piece then, and what was the topic?
So maybe it wasn't quite Bitcoin, but it was indirectly. It was a piece, and it was probably I'd have to check the dates on Substack, but it was the beginning of last year, I think. And it was decentralization versus centralization. Obviously, something that I'd been thinking about after my Doge purchase and all the other shitcoinery that happened after. So I was quite troubled by what happened during the pandemic and the divide between people and the inability to be able to talk about things without it getting weird.
Censored. Yeah.
And so if you had an opinion that was outside what had been curated in the media, you were either a nutter, stupid, a conspiracy theorist. I mean, everything that could get thrown at you was. Like, at no point did anyone think, oh, well, you've obviously really thought about this and you've done your research, other than just watching the BBC. They don't give you any credit. They just write you off as being a little bit crazy. So I wrote this piece about information, decentralized information versus centralized information. And it started off about Twitter. And I said, if they can deplatform the president, and I'm not a Trump fan, but I'm not a fan of anybody. Just let's get that straight. So I don't have a problem necessarily with the fact that they did take Trump off. It was more who did it and why do they have that power? And if there is someone who can switch off the president of the United States, no matter who they are, who's really controlling what we're reading and what we're looking at? And that really got me concerned and quite worried. And what is really crazy is I wrote this at the beginning of last year, and then the Twitter files came out confirming everything that I'd suspected. So that was another one of those bubbles where I was kind of getting frustrated with the people that I was surrounded by, their lack of awareness of what was. I mean, like I friends say to me that they might not even let family members over if they hadn't been vaccinated.
Yeah.
But you're not thinking this through. If you're happy with the vaccine and you've had it and you feel safe, that's fine. What other people do is of no consequence to you.
It was quite a weird thing because I always sort of think to myself the analogy of like nobody asks you for your polio vaccine certificate when you come over for dinner or something. Do you know what I mean?
No.
And there was some weird thing where people sort of seemed to abandon all of the kind of understanding that they had about how vaccines work. And it was really just done primarily through, I guess, like propaganda. It was a very, very strange period. And it's really odd. I mean, I think I was just kind of like, once you've been vaccinated, you should be quite confident. The other thing I found strange was how people got vaccinated and carried on walking around in masks. And I'm like, if you believe that the vaccine works, why are you still wearing a mask? Like those two things can't inhabit the same space. So there's some kind of disconnect going on in your thought process then. I think, like you say, people stop thinking critically and they stop sort of pulling things apart and trying to understand them and stop questioning things. So it almost becomes this herd mentality where the important thing is the approval of your peers and keeping to a certain narrative as opposed to actually trying to figure out what's truth, you know?
And it's virtue signaling, isn't it? I think a lot of the mask wearing is just, look how much of a good person I am. I'm wearing a mask. And but I think that's what they want to show, is that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it was all about, really, is being seen to be a good member of society. And that's the way that it was sold to us.
It was very strange in America because it became very polarized and politicized. I just thought it was really bizarre. Like if you were on the left, you wore a mask. If you were on the right, you didn't, more or less. And you could basically sort people in that thing. And it was a very strange thing because it was about medicine and about health. And that surely has which kind of told you that I think the propaganda machine was in full hard drive and nobody was thinking clearly at that point. Although saying that, we're going on a whole tangent on this, but saying that they did come out initially and say that masks did work. And then it was like, oh, no, they don't. And then it was like, no, first of all, they said they didn't work. And the only thing that worked was an N95. So I remember that very early in like March 2020. Then it was like, oh, actually, yes, masks do work. So everybody just wear a cloth mask. And now we're back to, no, they don't. And they've done a whole ton of studies now with specific to COVID. and now they're saying that they don't work again. And I'm just kind of like, this is just what that has left me with, is that you just can't believe anything that you read. Yeah. Well, you can't believe anything you read.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know that they don't know, but it changes like the weather depending on who's
the science can change. I mean, and it should be fluid. They should be able to change their mind based on new information, but they should also be able to say, we don't know.
Yes, but I think the problem was that they didn't change their mind based on new information. It wasn't like the mask mandates came in because they had suddenly proved that they worked. And I think that was the thing that in hindsight, I look back on it and I'm like, that was so ridiculous, you know, that it ended up being a thing. But I think to your point, it was partly the virtue signaling, but I think it was also partly the desire from the governing class to provide a visual for the pandemic that people could really buy into. And the mask was a visual for that. And it became more of like a, I don't know, an icon, if you like, of the pandemic, rather than an actual health measure that worked.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, putting a disgusting bit of like material in your pocket or on your arm so you can take it out again and stick it back on your face just so you look like you do it. You know, you just think, oh, come on, it doesn't make sense. They're not surgical. And even if they are surgical, my husband's an osteopath, and he, and when people were forced to wear masks, he said when he was treating their heads, he could feel the saliva coming on his hands.
Oh, really?
out the back of the mask.
Oh, like the humidity, you mean, the breath kind of thing, probably, not the saliva. So, I assume they weren't dribbling.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. They're not saliva. So I was just thinking wet stuff that comes out your mouth, but you're right. Yeah. But so it was coming back and it's kind of like going all over his hands. And he said that it was a really unpleasant, quite disgusting experience treating somebody with a mask on for that very reason, because it does escape.
Yeah. I'm just going to pause 1 second, sorry, because I resumed. Okay, so we have covered somewhat the little cockroach, your journey into writing the article. So you wrote this article about the decentralization, and then you published that to your Substack. And then what happened?
And then I started understanding about DeFi. So I started trying to think of the old system versus a system that could be. And then I wrote another article on traditional finance versus decentralized finance. So there was a theme there. It wasn't necessarily Bitcoin related, but it was everything that Bitcoin represented, but just in the form of banking or information. So then the third one that I wrote, which I think was last April, was how Bitcoin could save the environment. And then when I went to the Bitcoin Collective, I saw that amazing panel, the Environmentalist panel, and I thought, wow, the things that I thought were possible are actually happening. These are the people making that happen. And so I rewrote the article with how Bitcoin is saving the environment. So I updated it again from what I'd written last April.
Interesting.
With the new information that I was now in receipt of, that I had learned at the Bitcoin Collective.
You mean you changed your mind?
No, I didn't change my mind. It reinforced my opinion as I was able to add to it.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. No, I was just making a joke about the.
I do like to change my mind, though. That's the thing. I'm trying to make a point of not being fixed in my thoughts.
Yeah. What was the context of your interest in the environment before that then? Because then you've gone through kind of combining the Bitcoin piece with that. But what was it about the environmental stuff that you had an interest in? Has that been something that you've been active in anyway?
Yeah, kind of. It's just something that has always made sense to me. I mean, even whether or not you believe in the fact, I'm not trying to convince anybody that the climate is warming. I just think we should live on a nice planet that has rich biodiversity, clean air, and we don't take all of the resources. I mean, as animals, we should be able to live in harmony with nature and our surroundings. So the political climate movement aside, because obviously, you know, the government have made many mistakes on that. That's not where I'm coming from. It's just a case of I want to have a nice planet. and I want us all to live on a nice planet with clean air. And
I've got to be honest, I'm with you on that. I mean, I never used to have an opinion on any of this climate stuff because I just felt that I hadn't studied it enough, that it wasn't something I could really speak to. And then I did start doing some research last year. And what I seem to have concluded from looking at different opposing sides of the aisle in terms of what the view is that the planet is warming, but it's not definitive as to the reason why. And it seems like this may be a natural cycle. But what I do get annoyed about, and I completely agree with you on this, there's been a fixation about the temperature and this catastrophizing about it for decades now, none of which has come to fruition in the timelines that we were told. You know, we were all supposed to be underwater now, kind of thing. But what that detracts from is the focus on having a clean environment and not polluting the water supply, not polluting the food supply, not polluting the soil. And I feel that that's a real shame because there's this focus then on, you know, how much carbon is emitted, like what impact that has on the atmosphere, and much less on things like, hey, how about we don't just erode the soil that we grow our crops on, or why don't we farm in a sustainable way? You know,
so spray them with Roundup, you know, like the pesticides that we have on our food. It's just awful.
It's horrendous.
We've got all these health problems, and they will allow people to buy this cancer-inducing shit in the shops, but they won't let you smoke cannabis.
Well, it depends where you live. But yes, in the UK, I know.
In the UK,
it
doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. They won't allow you to take magic mushrooms, which is a mind expanding, wonderful thing that makes you connect your mind and body with nature, and would probably stop people from fighting and would give them more enlightenment. That's bad, right? But you can drink alcohol and one person every 20 minutes dies. You can buy that in Tesco's. You can vape. They've got. I even saw that they were selling vapes in a sandwich shop. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? But they will stop you from having magic mushrooms and cannabis.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense. Although, with regards to a warming planet, I do think that we are having an impact on that. And what concerns me the most is and which is why Bitcoin mining is so incredible, because it can actually take methane and turn it into use it for mining. Methane warms the planet a lot quicker than CO2.
That's right, isn't it? Something like 80 times more. Exactly. Has 80 times more impact of something. I think that was the number that I'd read. Yeah. So even there's confusion between CO2 and methane, and the thing is if it warms that quickly, we will lose the permafrost. If we lose the permafrost, we will have more methane, and we're talking about a very vicious circle. So I think people get confused with CO2 and I think it's CH4, and they have different impacts. But I'm not, like I say, I'm not here to preach on the global warming thing and the causes of it, but I do want to live on a nice, clean, healthy planet, whatever that looks like, with clean, healthy food and, freedom. That's ultimately what it's all about. So when you look at the piece where like Bitcoin fixes this,
yes, it
does. But what's your take on that? So can you sort of walk, I guess, listeners and viewers through the article and what your takeaways were from that?
So we can take stranded energy that would otherwise be lost. We've basically got an abundance of energy on this planet, but it's in all various different places. And I don't think you can transfer electricity more than 500 miles. So say if you do have, I think there was one project that I learned about actually when at the conference in Edinburgh. I think it might have been.
For context, we should talk about what we keep referencing. It was the Bitcoin Collective Conference in Edinburgh in October 2022. Yes. So the panel that you were referring to, just for context for people listening, was the panel with Margot Paez, who is the climate physicist and Bitcoiner. I think it was Mark Morton from Skilling Mining. Yeah. It was it Lee Bratcher from the Texas Blockchain Council that was chairing it, hosting it?
Possibly.
Was it him?
I'm not sure. Obi.
Was Obi Nwosu, who is the founder and CEO of Fedi, which is basically bringing Bitcoin to decentralized communities across the globe.
Which, if you switched from proof of work to proof of stake, you would take away all of those advantages. So that's why proof of work is so vital to Bitcoin, because it allows these remote communities that can use the energy that they've got that would otherwise be lost to either stabilize a grid or turn it into money. You know, the advantages of using that and using Bitcoin mining to power this is phenomenal. So I think it was Obi that was saying that when he went to this project in Africa, and I'm really sorry if I do get some of these bits wrong, he said that he saw.
I'll fact check you.
Will you? I would really appreciate that, actually, because I don't want to say anything that's incorrect. He said that
I'd happily go and watch the panel again, actually, because it was a good one. And for context,
it was a good one.
They actually got a standing ovation. It was that good of a panel. It was actually amazing. So I probably should go back and watch it. But yeah. I'm not going to fact check you.
No, it was a brilliant panel. So he said that he went to this the place where they were running I think it was a renewables plant, and so that they didn't overload the grid and cause brownouts, they were rediverting the excess energy from their renewables to boiling vats of water just to get rid of the energy. And I just think, okay, so then he basically said, well, Bitcoin fixes this. And so now they're using it to stabilize the grid and using that excess energy to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point to make for context for people is that it's the purpose of proof of work is to secure the Bitcoin network and create sound money, essentially, that can be trustless, which is the kind of key piece of the Bitcoin piece. But it's just a happy coincidence, if you like. I'm not sure that it was intentional. It's nice to think that it was intentional, but it seems like a heck of a leap to think that somebody could have conceived of these uses for Bitcoin mining. But it's a happy coincidence that, you know, when you drill for oil, you have methane that gets expelled that usually gets burned off because, like you say, it's done in remote locations where there are oil drilling, activities. And otherwise that stranded methane wouldn't be used, but you can capture it, power the Bitcoin mining, and therefore remove that pollution, as you say, from the atmosphere, and then stabilize the grid. And I think this was something I found frustrating when I first started delving into the mining thing, is that people kept saying stabilize the grid, but nobody ever explained what the heck that meant. So for context, I think it's probably good to mention that, like, when you have, like you say, electricity production, if you have excess electricity, it can't be stored easily. So with the Bitcoin mining, what it can do is it can buy that electricity when it's not needed.
Yeah.
But then when it's required by the grid, because there's a sudden change in the temperature and people need air conditioning or heating, or for whatever reason, there's a spike in energy use, the Bitcoin miners won't mine because the electricity becomes more expensive and it makes it less profitable for them to mine. And they can immediately, like instantaneously, switch off their machines. So now you don't have that problem, like you say, where it's like you would have to put batteries in place to store stuff or do anything like that. It can essentially capture all of that excess. And then you end up with a stabilized grid, which I think is why Texas has an independent grid in the US. So it's not connected up to the wider US grid. And I think that's why they have just embraced this, really, because ERCOT, their energy provider, is finding huge benefits from the Bitcoin mining.
Yep. Yeah, huge. And they work quite closely with each other, don't they? So when they had that really cold snap and people were turning on their very old cranky heaters that they've never used before, they were able to do a deal and shut down their mining operation and help them with their electricity supply. And likewise when it comes to air conditioning units and the possibilities up. I don't think Satoshi thought that this was the case, but that's why other people are there. He gave the world a brilliant idea and a brilliant solution. And the fact that there are brilliant minds working on finding all of these, for example, the Bitcoin Mining Council, I think it's 58% now of all Bitcoin is mined off renewables because there's an incentive to find cheap
I think it's higher than that, actually. And I think it's 61% was the last number I saw. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's creeping up the whole time. And you're absolutely right, because there's an incentive to find cheaper and cheaper sources of energy to be used. Yeah.
So what's not to like? They're mining methane off landfill.
Yeah, which is mad. I think that's what Mark Morton at Skilling Mining is doing. So he's utilizing the biogas from like biogas plants. And I've done some research in the UK. There are hundreds of people with biogas production facilities where they're dealing with waste that way, so producing the biogas that could use Bitcoin miners, and essentially make their operations cleaner but also more profitable.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer, and this information needs to get to people. They need to understand the benefits, because it will be so useful to so many different industries. And the money, it will help, because as the hash rate goes up and the difficulty increases and more energy is required, finding cheap and stranded energy is going to become even more essential. But then you've got countries like Africa that can turn their natural resources into money. The volcano bonds in El Salvador. All the different initiatives. I mean, geothermals, you name it. Anywhere that there's an abundant, free source of energy that would otherwise be lost in a remote location that it could be used for nothing else.
Yeah, completely agree. So that was one of your pieces then. So that, I guess, has taken you deep down the environmental stuff. And I know from conversations that we've had in the 5 days that we've known each other, from the previous conversation that we had, I know that you were super passionate about this topic. Can you talk to me a bit about the CBDC piece? Because that has been a huge piece of your kind of recent writings and appearances. I guess, first of all, explain what CBDC is for people, and then what your thoughts are around that.
So a CBDC, or central bank digital currency, is programmable money. It's money that the government can tell you what to spend it on, where to spend it, and if it expires. They can control how much you save. They can take money straight out of your account if you forget to pay the congestion charge in London, or you drive through a red light or something. No questions asked. They can just take it straight out. And it's just a way of controlling what people buy and what they do. And I think that when I spoke about it, I mean, I'm pretty certain that under this type of regime, it's an absolute Orwellian nightmare. But under this regime, any kind of Bitcoiner that puts their head above the parapet and says this is wrong is going to have their name marked and potentially their bank accounts shut down. I mean, you just have to look at what happened in Canada with the Canadian truckers. And what was really interesting about how that was sold over here, it was mentioned once on ITV, and they were called anti-vaxxers, which was shocking. But I went to a Web3 event in London, and I spoke to a Canadian lady, and I was like, "Oh God, you've got that awful guy as president." Yeah. And she looked at me, Prime Minister, sorry. And oh yeah, of course, because they're part of the Commonwealth, aren't they? And then she was like, and I was like, yeah, that stuff that happened with the Canadian truckers. And she was like, they were terrorists. I'm like, I don't think they were. I think they were just trying to say that they should have a choice as to whether or not they got a medical intervention. I just thought they should choose. And then she said, yeah, and they were also campaigning about not wearing masks. And I was like, well, isn't that fair enough? This was queuing for lunch, right? And I didn't think it was going to get so heavy so quickly. It did. And she was like, well, that just depends on who you vote for. And she literally said it like that. And I said, I don't vote for anyone. I like to think outside party lines. I like to not pick a side. And I was just like, and then basically the conversation just died because straight away her face was angry, and everything that I said clearly was massively triggering to her, which I felt really weird.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, really. It's I have quite a lot of context on that from my experience, in that I was living in the US when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening and Trump was in office. and I actually donated to Black Lives Matter. And that was a few weeks before it got so bad. We were living in New York at the time that I had a bag packed and ready to go with everything we needed to basically just get out if we had to get out quickly, and to go outside of New York, up to a friend's house up in Connecticut, who had said if we needed to sort of up sticks at very short notice that we could just come and stay with her. And, you know, they were smashing up all of Soho. There were cities all over. I mean, multiple people, like many people, died throughout those protests. Downtown areas, shops were razed to the ground. It was just absolute chaos. And I remember thinking with the trucker protest in Canada, it was my first impression was just, gosh, this is such a typically Canadian protest. It's polite. It's peaceful, it's very jovial, but you have to bear in mind as well that in Canada, in the UK you have the BBC, which is obviously people are forced to pay a license fee if they want to have a TV set, but that is really outside of Ofcom's kind of increasingly Orwellian reach. It's really the only kind of government controlled media. In Canada, the government subsidizes a huge amount of the media's budget, and they're also very woolly about telling you who's getting money and who isn't. But you can generally tell by the kind of reporting that happens. So there are a lot of Canadians, for example, that want the CBDC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, so the Canadian version of the BBC, to be shut down because they feel that it's extremely biased and it doesn't really report the news, it just reports government talking points. But I think that also extends to other publications. So I think that there is probably a cultural aspect in Canada where Canadians are just generally like to get along and be compliant. And I think that probably in some way impacts the response that people have. But I'll say this much, I mean, it never, Trump sort of presided over this absolute chaos that was going on in the US, and never in a million years did I think that he would entertain freezing people's financial assets as a result of making a donation to Black Lives Matter. So, you know, if he had done that, I would have had my bank account frozen in the US. And it's really interesting to me that people seem to, I think you can agree or disagree with what the truckers were protesting about. I think that piece is largely irrelevant. What matters is the right to protest and the right to do so without, you know, having your bank account frozen. And for some reason, people just don't seem to make that connection, because now this precedent has been set where it doesn't matter who's in office. It can be the right, the left, the conservatives, the liberals, you know, the precedent has been set that it's okay to financially censor somebody. Well, once you do that, it becomes very hard for them to protest. So now what you've effectively created is a situation where it's very difficult for citizens to protest against something they don't like, because the government, if it disagrees, can financially censor them. And I really thought, I mean, when I would sort of read things about people saying, oh, you know, the honking in downtown Ottawa was terrible, it was this, it was that. I mean, a protest is supposed to be disruptive. And I was in London in 2011 when we had the riots, and we had helicopters going over our house. We were living not too far from Clapham High Street. The whole high street was smashed up. At no point did I think that, you know, if you were donating to the protesters, I know that they weren't a very organised group, but let's pretend that they had been. At no point did I think the UK government should have had the right or the means to freeze my bank account because I'm supporting a cause that they maybe disagree with. And that was actual vandalism. I mean, there was nothing like that happened during the Canadian protests. So
Although it was portrayed like that, because I remember seeing a live stream on Twitter, and this guy was basically filming, and he said, look how peaceful this protest is, look. And then he looked over and there was a media person interviewing the one person in the crowd that looked like a nutter.
Of course. Yeah, well, it just goes to show you how much things can be shifted. I mean, I had a friend whose daughter was living in Ottawa at the time, and this friend of mine visited several times during the trucker protest, and she said to me, they keep talking about everything being blockaded, and she said, I've been driving to doctor's appointments, vet's appointments for my daughter's dog, never have I had any problems getting around town or going anywhere. And she said, they're lying. Like, she was furious, and her comment to me was really fascinating. She said to me, all my life, I've never understood how it was possible for the Nazis to do what they did. As she said, now I understand how they managed to convince people that this was the case and how easily people's perception of things was manipulated. Yes, I mean, I'm not saying that the protest wasn't disruptive to some degree to people who lived in downtown Ottawa, but I think to myself, you guys have no idea what a disruptive protest looks like, clearly, because when you're living somewhere where you have to have when you're living somewhere where you've got, context London, helicopters flying over your head, the high street a few blocks or streets away from you get smashed up, or you're living in, New York and you've got a bug out bag ready because things are so bad that you don't know if you're going to have to exit stage left at very short notice because things could start burning in the buildings next to you. I don't think people appreciate that context. And I'm just kind of like, there is actual criminal damage. And one of the news pieces that was defined as there's a runner called Terry Fox, who's very kind of revered in Canada, and there's a statue of his in Ottawa, I believe, and they had put a Canadian flag around him and something, I don't know if it was some sort of other tribute items or whatever, and the news story that ran on it was that they had vandalized his statue. So that was how it was written up in the media. And then when you see the pictures, he had a Canadian flag wrapped around his shoulders. I mean, it's just the insanity of portraying it that way. And this is why the Bitcoin maxim, don't trust, verify.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so important. Yeah, because you then
have you heard of the public order bill that's been gone through in the UK?
In the UK? Oh, I think vaguely, yes, vaguely.
I think that made it illegal to organise or even talk about organising a protest. They're really the Just Oil people, when they were, I do disagree with disrupting roads when safety is involved. I mean, really, when cars are whizzing down the M25 and you're fucking about on a gallantry, whatever it's called, I think that's bad. I know you've got to make your point, but don't put people's lives at risk. Not like that.
I think as well with the Just Oil thing, I mean, there are some very rich and powerful people like Chris Hone, who's a hedge fund owner who funds all of these organizations. So I had a strong suspicion when I saw that happening. I mean, all these funny things where they were going into galleries and gluing themselves to the walls. I was just like, this is so ridiculous. Poor Van Gogh and whoever else got soup thrown at their paintings, as if they would have any idea of any of this going on. But I did think to myself, it feels to me as if these disruptions are being encouraged to to manufacture consent with the general public,
so they
to
can
then
put through
draconian laws. 100%. And I'm kind of like, we see you, it's a similar thing, I think, with this whole crypto thing, right? I mean, I think actually Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, and Caitlin Long, the CEO of Custodia Bank, both came out and said this recently. They had both warned the US regulators about issues with not regulating crypto properly. And they were ignored. And now the US regulators are coming in and saying, oh, well, we need to have all this draconian stuff and, crypto bad. And I think the intention ultimately is to lump Bitcoin in with all of these things.
I'm not so sure. I don't know, because I think they've clearly said it's a commodity, and I do think that they understand the difference. And I think the whole FTX scandal that was just fraud. No amount of regulation, I don't think, would have stopped that. That was just a bad person doing bad things.
Yes and no. I agree with that, but I think if there had been good regulation in the crypto space in the US, retail consumers would have gravitated towards companies that were regulated in the US and not to companies that were domiciled in the Bahamas. I think that was the issue. I agree with you. It was just pure fraud, and they could have operated as a fraudulent organization anyway. But if you had a viable option, you would probably go with the more viable option that was domiciled in the US, where you had recourse.
Absolutely. And I did think it was funny. I actually listened to that announcement that was made. I think it was was it a couple of months ago? And they made it in the US. They made this massive thing, and they had this press conference, and it was all very serious. And they were talking about taking down, was it Fitzlardo or Fitz?
Bislato or something. Yes.
Bislato. Who the fuck is that? No one. It's like you've literally made this song and dance, and everyone's there. What's the announcement? Oh my god, what's it? Because it was just after FTX and everything like that. So everyone's like, what is it?
Well, the funniest thing was, I'm sure you saw this on Twitter, everybody was like, what's Bislato? Nobody had heard of it. So they're kind of like, there was this giant thing that was right in your face. You were having regular meetings with FTX, and it was this massive fraud. And then they were kind of like, oh, we've taken down this service in the crypto space that no one's ever heard of.
That no one had heard of. No one. And that's the kind of insanity that we're dealing with, isn't it?
It's just to manufacture a headline, isn't it? To say, oh, look at all the enforcement that we're doing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was a Fed created service that they just put into place and then thought, oh, we'll take it down now and put a big headline saying that we're doing enforcement. I just don't trust anything anymore.
Not when you see shit like that. Like, that's just nonsensical.
So I have a question for you. I'm just conscious of time. I want to ask you what's next on the horizon for you then. So now you're kind of, you've done your writing, you've done your foray into Bitcoin, you appeared on GB News recently in the UK. People should go and watch that to talk about CBDCs. So that was a very important conversation that you had. What's next?
I would like to do more research and focus my attentions on a specific part of Bitcoin, which is the environmental part and mining and everything like that. So, I mean, I do like writing about Bitcoin, but I would really like to learn that in detail and focus my research on that little niche and all the different things that come off it. Yeah,
that's cool. Okay, well, onwards and upwards then. And where can people find you?
On Twitter. I'm not massively active on Twitter. I mean, I might post something from time to time. Don't get too excited. But if you look me up at Decentralisation.
Decentra, so DECENTRASUZE. You put a Z in there.
Susie didn't sound as cool though, did it? I mean, come on. That's
why everybody spells your name with a Z.
They've always done it. It's always happened. That doesn't help though, but yeah.
Okay, cool. And what's your Substack?
I think that's also at Decentralisation. So you can
decentralisation.substack.com.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Miami. That's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. And I guess onwards and upwards. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the chat. And hopefully we can do this again.